Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic today, catch up of a previous topic. Let's do it. What's something you swear you saw but have no proof of? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was about to walk in the front door around midnight and saw an explosion way up in the sky. The flash was so bright that for a fraction of a second everything went daylight. I called a few people that I knew were still up and out, but nobody had seen anything. A couple hours later, I mentioned it to someone and he said, "That's funny. Someone was telling me how a satellite exploded a couple of weeks ago, and it was an explosion with a bright flash." Walking home at night from college in Ireland in the early 90s, I saw an elderly man looking up with a puzzled look on his face. I looked up and saw an orange light about the same brightness as Venus lazily moving back and forth in the sky, but completely silent. Suddenly, it shot off in one direction as what could only be described as ludicrous speed for a second or two before coming to an immediate stop, then just sitting there, motionless. A few moments later, it shot off in another direction and came to a stop. The two of us watched this for 3 to 4 minutes before it shot straight up and disappeared. Old fellow looked at me, shrugged, and said, "Well, you don't see that every day," and walked off. About 10 years ago, I was looking out my grandmother's back door. Two squirrels were playing in the yard. A hawk swooped down and grabbed one. As it was batting its wings and gaining altitude, the other squirrel raced up a nearby tree, leapt off, rocketed down into God's own death from above, and rescued his friend by curb stomping the hawk out of the air. They both ran away, and the hawk limped off in confusion. I once saw the Pend Oriel paddler. He's a Nessie-like creature that plies the waters of Lake Pend Oriel in the United States Pacific Northwest, northern Idaho to be exact. It's pronounced Pound Ore, by the way. Lake Pend Ore is tremendous and gorgeous, with thick forests that grow right down to the water's edge. It's also very, very deep, 1,150 feet or 350.52 meters. It has a lot of huge logs floating in it, which can be a hazard to watercraft. My first husband was part of the crew on a racing yacht, and I tagged along early one cold, foggy morning. As we were sailing along, a few of us off to the left side of the boat, we were heading due south, what looked like an absolutely massive tree trunk in the water. Only this trunk was moving all on its own in the opposite direction to our sailboat. It was leaving a wide wake in the water, and as we watched, 3 bumps appeared above the surface. They were the blue-green color of dark water, think lake water in the shade, and they were covered in small scales. We could see an actual space between the humps and the water. We kept watching in utter silence as it passed us by, until it suddenly just disappeared below the surface. I'm still convinced 30 years or so later, this was in the 80s, that I saw the paddler. For one thing, logs don't just motate on their own. Second, they don't have visible humps like this object did. And third, they can't be submerged, but they don't have the wherewithal to submerge that quickly, and that completely. Also, this thing was whisper quiet. It was a pretty calm morning too, with no choppy water, so it could not have been mistaken for rough waves. I feel so special and blessed to have seen it that morning, and I would have loved to have filmed it. I wonder how many lakes or ponds or bodies of water have a mythical beast or creature associated with them. Do you have any in your town or state? When I was younger, like a little girl, I swear I had a babysitter. She was pale, skinny, had beautiful long hair, and was super sweet to me. But she didn't like my parents that much because she'd always leave when they interrupted our playtime. Her name was Stacy. Years later, and when I try to bring this up to my parents or grandma, they act like I'm crazy. I was on a houseboat with my family in the Thousand Islands, St. Lawrence River in Canada. We docked on one of the tiny islands for the night. A branch cracks loudly over the boat, and a snake that, to me at that age, looked to be the size of a snake in the film Anaconda, fell from a tree and landed across the boat. It splashed down into the water and swam away. Everyone I told believed it was a snake, but nobody believed how huge it was. Blue meteor. It was the middle of summer, was at a friend's house. We were drinking, playing loud music, shooting the shit. I'm sitting there, looking up at the sky. I see this flash of blue, aquamarine cyan, but a little bit richer. I tell my brother and our friend to look up so they can see, but they brush it off. I keep staring, a couple of seconds go by, and then I see the meteor itself race across the sky. Gorgeous. It was white with a long blue, completely straight tail. A year or two ago, I saw what I thought was rain. Looked at the ground, no wet mark. I stick my hand out, one lands on my wrist and forearm. Nothing there, not even wet. I see a couple more. My father saw some too. No idea what it really was. Growing up, my brother and I used to have this running joke about how the neighbor's kid never grew up. I'm now in my late 30s, and when I went to visit my parents recently, I caught a glimpse of the neighbors outside. Their whole family still looks the same, including the kids who are still kids. I wish I had photos of them from the past to do a past and present comparison. One time I was home alone and heard something odd at the front door. This was about 10 years ago. I opened the door and there were two ducks standing there quacking at me. One was male and the other a female. Anyway, they continued to quack and slowly waddled down the driveway and then down the street. I shook my head in disbelief and closed the door. In hindsight, I wished that I'd followed them, as it seems they wanted me to follow them. That was the only time I've seen ducks in the neighborhood and have not seen any since. Not something I saw, rather something I felt. My great-grandfather died when I was 8, and I remember being sat in my room on the floor. As I remember being sat in silent contemplation, as I know now, I didn't know grief felt like loss, like a part was missing now. And I felt a strong squeeze on my shoulder, like a grandfather's squeeze, comforting but not capable of hurting me. My family to this day say my child brain was trying to rationalize my grief, but I still hold to this as one final farewell. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, but it certainly helped me move forward and support my mom, uncles, and grandfather in their grief. I have two. About 14 years ago, I was working 2 jobs, and one of them was a Taco Bell drive-thru. The customer waiting at the window was a lady with a Homeland security jacket. I got curious and asked, "Do you really work for Homeland Security?" "Yeah, it's mostly just paperwork." "Oh, okay, good. Just making sure you guys aren't watching me." "Don't you also work at Walmart?" I'm speechless because I had never seen this woman before and I never saw her again. Also, another time I was working the drive-thru by myself on a busy and short-staffed night. I'm more agnostic than anything, but I had this customer who was the spitting image of Jesus Christ. He wasn't dressed in holy robes or glowing or anything, but I wanted my boss to take a second and look at him. "Man, I ain't got time for Jesus." So I sigh, and I pass Jesus his food. He drives away and our power goes out. My boss is pissed, but we all collectively blame him for disrespecting a deity. I think the question we all want to know is, what did Jesus order from the Taco Bell menu? This was in the 90s, pre-camera recording mobile phones. I was staying at my then-girlfriend's house. We were about 16, and at one point we both saw a photo frame that hung on a wall, rocking back and forth slowly for about a minute or two. It was in a small room, no open windows or drafts, no earthquakes, etc. To this day, I have no idea how that could have happened, but we both saw it and were just staring at it. It was pretty freaky at the time. This was in or around 2015 in Irvine, California. I was skateboarding outside of a Panera Bread late at night, goofing around, being an idiot, usual teen stuff. I had left my skateboard on a parking block and was urinating in the bushes when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, right behind me, I turned around and a huge effing owl had swooped my skateboard off of the parking block and flew with it about 50 feet in the big-ass tree. I'd never been so damn confused. After about 25 minutes, he just flew away. I was able to get my skateboard back eventually. It blew my mind. Note, I'd like, though, to think he was being a good patrol owl and wanted to keep me from skating on or running property. Then again, maybe he was just like, "I'm going to F with this kid." Head. I saw a tornado empty a hotel swimming pool. This was in Nebraska, mid-90s. We were staying in a room that has a sliding patio door that opened to an outside pool. The building was sort of a U-shaped with the pool in the U. Storms were bad, and the hotel had lost power in the middle of the night. I pulled back the curtains by the sliding door to look outside and see how bad it was. Right then, I heard a sound like a combination freight train and steam whistle, and saw the entire contents of the pool just lift straight up out of the ground like someone hit it with a giant shop vac. There was about 3 to 4 second delay, where I could only describe the sound as a combination of wind in a cave and water flowing through pipes. Then the wind pitched really high for a split second, and suddenly it all stopped, like someone dumping a bucket of water into a solo cup. The water crashed back down into the sides of the hotel. About half of it flooded back into the pool, and the rest flowed across the patio area and out to the parking lot, and the tornado was gone. Like sucking up an entire swimming pool killed its energy or something, and it just all crashed back down. A bunch of cars were moved sideways, and a huge tree fell right next to our car and pancaked them. We had nothing on our car but a few little twigs and leaves. You could see the path the tornado crossed the road and came right into the hotel pool area. Zero damage to the hotel at all that we could see the next morning. Probably when I was between the ages of 7 and 12. I always used to go out walking with the new phone I got. I'd go around collecting kilometers and watch the steps go up. Simple brain of a child, I know. Anyway, the morning of a weekend, I once again would get up early for a walk. It's about a 2-minute walk up to a farm road to reach a forest. Might be important to point out that my village is surrounded by small mountains, meaning as you would go up this mountain, you need to look up to see the road ahead. So as I was walking, I randomly stopped to look around me, and like I often do. No one would be up this early, and so it would be me completely silent, and you could listen to the sounds of nature all around you. As I was coming closer to a turn, my destination was a bench at the top of this little mountain that I could see from here. I saw something else, or rather someone else. A man, or woman, I don't know, was standing roughly 600 meters up from where I stood, around where my bench was. That in itself wasn't so unusual. Farmers go up here all the time, but what made me stop in my tracks was that this person was wearing complete white attire, and I meant completely white pants, a white long suit, and a white hat. He was also leaning on a cane. In that moment, I could swear he looked at me, corrected his hat, and turned, disappearing behind the curvature of the little hill. To this day, I don't know who that person was. I am quite certain I know most people in our little village, and I sure as hell don't know who would walk up to a bench at the edge of the forest in full white attire this early in the morning just to look at a child, and then disappear. This happened just 2 weeks ago. I woke up in the middle of the night and decided to take a shower, which is already weird because I don't usually do that. I just left my undies on the bathroom floor, and while I was standing under the water adjusting to the temperature, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. Our shower isn't separated from the bathroom by a curtain or anything, so I had full view of this. My undies appeared to be unraveling slightly. I guess when I removed them, they rolled up a little. I just stood there thinking, this is weird. But then as I was watching this, my undies slid across the bathroom floor about 12 inches or so, as though they were being dragged across. I like to think I'm a rational thinker, and I don't believe in the paranormal, so I sort of just froze there in shock over what I just saw and needed a minute to process it. After trying to rationalize it and realizing I had no explanation, I just noped out of there and woke up my partner. He was a real trooper about being woken up in the middle of the night to help investigate this strange phenomenon, and there have since been many jokes made about the haunted underpants. We're sure there's some scientific explanation for it, but it was quite bizarre nonetheless, and I was definitely a little on edge for a few days afterwards. If any physicists or scientific folk want to chime in and help me understand this, please feel free to share your thoughts. When I was real little, maybe 7 or something, we were on a family vacation to South Dakota to see the Black Hills and Mount Rushmore. This was in the 90s. It could probably figure out the year, but it doesn't matter that much. We stopped at one of the scenic view pull-offs for a picnic lunch, and while Mom was setting up, my dad was trying to watch all 3 kids. I ran off and went exploring. At some point, I remember sliding down a steep cliff with the bottom being hundreds of feet down, likely death. As I would slide, I was grabbing anything I could. Grass, chunks of dirt, rocks, anything to keep me from slipping all the way. Everything gave way, and I'd toss it to the side. Suddenly, my foot felt like it was on a step. I pushed off, and I felt another and another, until I could see my dad shouting frantically for me. I screamed, and he picked me up and pulled me off the cliffside. There were no steps. My dad said it looked like a sharp drop. He never believed that I got several steps lower and well out of sight. I had no reasonable explanation how I didn't die that day.